What's going on, guys? I am Nick,
I'm Eric.
and we are doing an interview today here on Talking Interference Sports, and then doing our regular show. We are going to have Bree Schaaf. She is an Olympic analyst right now of skeleton and of bobsled, and she was competing.
Slidey sports.
Yeah, the sliding sports. Slidey sports. She was competing in the early 2000s in the Olympics for bobsled. I don't know if she ever did. We'll find out. I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but semi.
Not yet.
But
we will eventually.
Yeah, we will get her on the phone here in a second. How was your week?
My week was excellent. A little sad though on Sunday.
Man, crazy week of football.
Well, yeah, and it was also the series finale of Preacher.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that's over.
All right, let's try and get Bree on the phone here real quick. And we'll go ahead and get this thing going. Ooh.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's good. I'm getting an echo.
Oh, okay. Hold on one second.
Are you hearing that?
Yeah. Actually, let me call you back real quick. Let me see if.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Bye. An echo.
It's probably because of the dungeon.
Well, let me take this friggin' thing off real quick. If I can figure out how to.
There you go. If the case doesn't fit, you must acquit.
I'm a professional, guys. I'm professional.
Usually you have to pay for this kind of expertise.
That's right. And you get it here free on Game Changer Sports Network on Talking Interference Sports.
Hello.
All right, is that better?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So are you feeling up to talking with us for just a little bit?
Yeah, I apologize because my voice seems to be going in and out today, so that might get weird, like a Peter Brady bunch style, but should be all right.
All right. So we are live on Talking Interference Sports, and we have Bree Schaaf, who is a NBC analyst for. So do you just? Oh, she hung up. So we're having a little technical difficulties here. Jeez.
Maybe she just decided that
She didn't want to do it.
yeah, she has just had cold feet. She's like, no, I'm not talking to these idiots.
Hello.
I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Give me that intro again.
All right, so we're here with Bree Schaaf. We're live on Talking Interference Sports, and so you're you're an analyst on NBC for Winter Olympics for just bobsled.
Correct, semi-correct. So I do the skeleton analysis, but then they've also kept me in the last two Olympics to do course side reporting, kind of like halftime reports that I'll do between the first and second heats of the races and kind of analyzing points on the track or interesting things that you might have seen earlier in that race, make some predictions, talk about the sticking points, or try to help people understand, a little bit more of the nuances of the sport.
Okay, and so you've been doing this since 2009, right?
Well, yes. So I started actually there was a World Championships being held in Lake Placid, New York, and that's a home track. And one of the announcers there for NBC SN, so their sports network, the races kind of got fed live. At that point, they were getting fed to NBC Sports, and so one of the head announcer asked me if I'd fit in with him for a couple races. And so it was the first race I did was my brother made fun of me because he said there was an old SNL skit where they had the NPR ladies talking really kind of low and soft.
Yeah.
how it sounded on my first race. Because until you hear your own voice really loud in your head, because you've got a headset on and then the microphone kind of booming back at you, so it's a bit unnerving. But once I finally got used to that and got into the race, then it kept bringing me back. So I would race and then commentate the men's races all in the same weekend while I was on a World Cup tour. Yeah, and so it became a nice little side gig. So then once the Olympics came around and I didn't qualify for the 2014 games, I was trying to go for a second Olympics, got injured, had some difficulties, but had enough of a resume that when NBC lost their skeleton analyst, they reached out to me and thought that the reel was doable, good enough, and brought me out. So it's fun. That's a really, really fun way to see the Olympics. I've got to see it from all different sides now, from as a spectator in 2006, competing in 2010, and then now covering for NBC.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
When I was reaching out to you, you had mentioned that you were coaching. Can you explain, like, are you coaching on a circuit, like for the national team, or?
Yeah, I got all sorts of side hustles going here. So one of them is, it's just rugby sport getting with blood, and it's so hard to let them go. Especially, I did this sport for actually 12 years, 14 years, and then have gone on to coach after. So I've been involved for 17 years now, and it's one of those really niche, tunnel expertise kind of situation where you think, okay, I've learned a lot about this, I have a lot to give back. And so for the last couple of years, I was the International Bobsled Skeleton Federation. They call it the Emerging Nations Skeleton Coach, and it's part of Bobsled as well. So I would help out the smaller countries that maybe can't afford their own sliding sports programs. They would get assistance from the International Federation. So I was the official coach for countries like Jamaica and Brazil and Argentina, Australia, anyone that qualified for that assistance.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's quite a resume you got.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating too, because all the different cultures approach it differently, and you're getting all sorts of different talents. So it's a fascinating problem, coaching-wise, of trying to figure out, okay, what is their sports background? How can I help adapt this sport and help them understand something that makes no sense? Like, no one was born to do skeleton. No one was born to bobsled. Like, it's just a really ridiculous winter crazy sport that, most people, I believe, can learn if you've got, the ability to stay calm under just ridiculous circumstances.
No, that totally makes sense.
That was actually one of the things that we were talking about. It was like, how do you get into bobsledding? Like,
yeah, so that was going to be my next question is you grew up in the Kitsap County area, right?
Yeah, yep. I went to Olympic High School, and grew up born at Bremerton Hospital. I think it's shut down. So in the area, and so for the most part, interesting. There's a collection of sports that actually are transition sports. And I've done a bit of youth coaching as well, because the Youth Olympics are a thing now. And honestly, I'm kind of ethically against that, because there's no research on what happens to a kid's brain when you're sending them down an ice tube at 90 miles an hour. Yeah. There's a bit of trauma involved. So it is a sport that we tend to recruit later on. So we can recruit collegiate athletes that have some sort of background with explosive power. So like for men's bobsled, we tend to try and find either track and field athletes or football players do really, really well because they can take the hits in a sled. Pretty rough ride. And on the women's side, it's all over the place. Like women's bobsledders, one of our top bobsledders in the U.S. Was a professional softball player.
Oh.
And for me, yeah, so it's really interesting on the women's side, because you're basically looking for a running back style athlete that you don't see specifically in other women's sports. You're trying to find a female that is strong and fast. So what we'll typically do is try and find someone fast and then see how strong we can get them. Because the sled is about, depending on, it's a combined weight limit. So the heavier you are, the lighter the sled you push, which is faster start time, which is a really important component to success in the sport. So on average, our women's bobsledders are usually like between 170, 180 pounds and can squat a ridiculous amount. The sled will weigh between anywhere, depending on your body weight, roughly 400 to 500 pounds is the sled you're pushing.
Yeah, they don't look light by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
And then having to run on ice.
Yeah, so it's one of my favorite women's sports ever because you just don't see women that are that strong. My teammate Alana, I have a video of her squatting something like 400 something pounds, I think.
That's crazy.
Good God.
There is videos of you doing squats on YouTube. I was like, oh, what? Like, yeah, you got actually quite a bit of in the gym videos on YouTube. I found that fascinating.
Man, it's embarrassing just compared to what my teammates could do. I was definitely not known as one of the stronger people on the team. But you know what's cool though is like when you focus on strength, it's impressive to see with our football players as well. Because it's not like they haven't spent their careers lifting, but if you focus all of your time, all summer long, on just strength and recovery, it's amazing the gains you can make. Like when I switched from skeleton to bobsled and decided I wanted to get in the driver's seat and focus on strength, I couldn't believe how my squat went up like 150 pounds. Bench press, like I got to places that I had no idea were possible.
That's crazy.
Yep.
So in Kitsap County, I don't really know of any place that really draws people into sliding sports. What drew you to it?
So I was playing volleyball at Portland State University. I went there on a volleyball scholarship, and that was, I mean, sliding sports tend to be athletes that have a first love elsewhere, and then this is an opportunity maybe if they can't see continuing in that first sport. So for me, it was volleyball, and I always thought that I would continue to play that as long as I could. But my senior season lined up with the debut of women's bobsled at the 2002 Olympics. And so I specifically remember being in sports medicine at the time at Portland State and telling the trainer, like, I'm going to do bobsled. And like, you're crazy. That's not happening. And then, sure enough, we looked at it, and actually my brother said, I want to do skeleton. So my brother was the first one to go out. Schaaf went out to the Olympic Training Center that following winter to do a recruiting camp. And he said, you got to get out here now. Like, you will kill this combine, you'll be part of this. So that's how I ended up doing skeleton first before I could finally come into bobsled coaches getting a shot.
Okay, so I got a question about that. What steered you towards doing skeleton over luge?
So skeleton over bobsled wasn't even, because at the time I was still pretty small for volleyball, so I wasn't big enough for bobsled, and that's why I had trouble getting the coaches to let me try bobsled. Luge is a really interesting sliding sport because they start them very young. In Germany, they all start their athletes at around 5 years old, which, if you want to question Child Protective Services in Germany and how well that's functioning, it's a really common sport there. And they actually then use that to recruit into bobsled. So luge is a sport where you need a lot of experience because they have a very sharp angled kufen, which is a field. That's what they call their runner, the blade that's on the ice. And it's so precise. They actually, so if you think about this, a double luge sled, which is obviously a whole other subject, but a double luge sled, there's less speed to be found on the track if you can manipulate the G-force well enough. A double luge sled will go faster than a four-man sled, despite being way lighter. That's how much speed you can find. But it's the same with NASCAR. Good drivers really excel in luge because of how precise their steering is. It's all trying to manipulate G-force just enough in each corner, minimal effective jolts to accelerate the sled, but not slow it down too much.
That's crazy. I had no idea. Yeah.
Yeah, luge takes a lot of experience. That's when it starts really young. And they'll typically go for, 20 plus years.
Crazy.
Well, and that actually kind of leads me into one of my questions was, is it, how do you, as a driver, how do you negotiate the track based on when you have to go? Because I assume there's not a little mini Zamboni that cleans the track every time. So if you got first shot at it, is that better or worse than being closer to the end? Or
there's definitely ice conditions do play into it. That's similar to ski racing, and conditions can change based on the weather. So they invented something that's kind of like a track Zamboni, but most of us don't like it because it makes really arbitrary angles in the ice, and it makes it less intuitive. It's this robot arm that will go up and down its shape, but they have what the Germans call ice meisters, which is basically just ice artists that are so good at looking at ice and profiling it. So you get all the corners are built in. So all of these tracks exist with concrete structures, and then they add ice in the wintertime when it starts to get cold. So what those guys are doing is adding ice and taking it out in certain spots to then try and feed the sled into the next corner, or they can also use that to make it more difficult. So you can show up to race day and things are different than you had the training week before, but it is in ideal conditions. It's definitely better to go sooner, because what they do is they'll spritz the track and prep it. They'll put a fresh spritz on. Sometimes they'll steam it just to get it as fast as possible. You definitely want a top draw, so they do kind of a race draw.
Huh. I had no idea. So I'm completely like in the dark about this. This is why I find it so fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of those things that people kind of pops up on television once every 4 years. And like, that's enough. So I was getting to that. He just shows a recruiting pitch here for anyone that feels like they're strong and fast and has some Olympic ambition. Bobsled is a great outlet for that.
That's cool. So what made you decide to make the transition from skeleton to bobsled?
A lot of it was that I've got a really big head. And so my head is having a preemption. I think I remember being in sports medicine, actually, the late class in the Olympic training center, and all of us scales and athletes were laying our head down on a scale, and they're hardly scientific, but you can still see the difference in my head weighing at like 10 or 11 pounds. But so the problem that I was having in skeleton is as soon as my head would get under G-force, which in most tracks is, by corner 4, and so as soon as I get under G-force, my face was plastered to the ice. So I was having to learn all the tracks I feel and timing, and just testing out timing. So you're just kind of taking it in the teeth and learning by error, which I felt like in order to get to the tip-top level was going to be kind of insurmountable. If you're gold in Olympic medal, I just felt like, okay, if I can't see and where I'm going, and I'm, guessing, and you've got kind of limited time when you're transitioning sport, older athlete, and women's bobsled at the time, had a little bit of an opening in it. So there's an opportunity there. And of course, once I sat in a bobsled, you're going, from ice currents first going on the ice. And when you're facing on the ice, you can really only see a couple meters ahead because the ice is profile is curved. So there was like that in a bobsled. So I'm in a recliner, I could see the whole damn corner. Like, all right, there's no going back.
Yeah, okay.
I've got control. Skeleton is more kind of encouraging the sled, where bobsled you have pivoting front runners that are actually able to steer the ice a bit better.
I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
It was fun to have a teammate that came from team sports, so yeah. Working with brakemen made it a lot more fun.
What similarities have you found between bobsledding and skeleton that made you feel confident in your transitioning?
That was actually that was big trouble for me. So normally what they do is they'll take a talented brakeman who is maybe having trouble making it into the top, or Alana Byers, one of our best athletes, she won a bronze medal as a brakeman in 2010, and then decided she wanted to drive. So that's the typical path, is pulling a brakeman into the driver's seat. The problem is you spent their whole career with their head between their knees. You haven't seen anything, so they're having to learn the track, and everything feels like it's coming at them really fast. They hadn't seen it before. Whereas I had a huge advantage from having learned on the track and feeling them with my body, and also taking out everything from so much slower that it was actually, it made for a really quick transition driving line. Once I got a feel for, if you're manipulating the G-force, it definitely feels different on your body on the skeleton foot than it does in your hand, where it's all kind of delayed from lunges and ropes and the articulation. But once I got a feel for what that G-force felt like in my hand, it's way better.
That's cool. Okay, so the difference in the G-force of like one sled to the other was pretty similar.
You're trying to find a feel. So you're steering a G-force in a corner, and you're trying to manipulate it at the right time and just enough. So on a skeleton sled, you're either pushing your shoulder or your knee in, and you can kind of feel the tension. Like if someone is pulling your hand, or if you've got a bungee and you're pulling on it, you can feel tension there. And so what you're feeling for is the tension of that G-force. So if I'm in a corner that's going to the right, it's a vertical wall. And so in order to steer the pressure, I'm actually going to steer down. You're not steering left and right. You're squeezing pressure. So with the bobsled, I would pull my right hand under the earring, and that grabs just enough pressure that then I can feel that tension, and I play with it, trying to figure out where I need to release it in order to accelerate the sled.
Okay. We are here with Bree Schaaf, Olympic athlete, winter sports, sliding sports, just Got a couple more questions for you. I got about 5 more. Is that all right? I know you said your throat was hurting. You're good on that?
Yep, was good.
Okay, so over the time in your competing, what would you say the most memorable run that you had was?
Ooh, that was easy. The fastest run I've ever had. Whistler, we were at the Whistler track. It was the year after the Olympics. So we just had, it was interesting because we had the 2200 meter, and then the very first race in World Cup we had the next year was back at the Whistler track. It was already interesting because that was such a massive ordeal. And that track has one of the steepest gradients of any track in the world. It also just takes its corners. So a tight corner is going to slow us down. A big corner is allowed to keep accelerating. So that's what's the fastest track in the world. And there was a training run in Whistler that season where, like, I thought that I didn't have enough caffeine. I took a great run leading up into the really technical part, and then all of a sudden I felt like my hand was behind, and I was just barely able to keep up with the track. And I got down, and I was like, man, I just didn't want that consciously. I really got to get it together. And then I found out from my coach who radioed me that I broke my women's speed record in the U.S. And in the training run, the unfinished runners I've done about 95 miles an hour.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it found my hands were shaking. And of course, my next run was terrible. It was way slower, but it was wild to see how it was a really good portion of the top of the track, how much faster that made everything else. And so it was just, like all of a sudden you're just going like left, right, and the track was done.
How much of I just from talking to you, I just came up with this question here. How much of the start in which you're like getting that running start makes the difference in the speed of your run, like the speed of?
So we always say that whatever advantage you can gain at the start, depending on the track, it varies a little bit, but you can typically take that advantage and multiply it by 3. So if I get a really good break in, and now suddenly my start is improved by 500, which is a lot in the sport, then that in theory will give me a 1500 advantage at the bottom. So, if you are suddenly breaking start records and you're starting out ahead of everyone, and if you don't mess up that run, in theory that gives you 3/10 of an advantage. So I always like to say that as far as the order of importance in sliding and being successful and having a fast time, it's about a third start, a third of the equipment technology, and then a third of driving skill.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot more intricate than I had thought it would have been.
I know when you watch it, it does not look remotely intricate.
Wow.
Yeah. It's I can't imagine just going through like each different run and then none of them are the same because the ice is a little bit different temperature or
yeah, the tracks are all different, and then you're right, the conditions always change. So even if I've got infinite notes in my sliding notebook about what the track did that year and what was successful, what runners I ran and what worked and what conditions, it's always going to be different the next season. So you get the basic principles down in every track. Every corner is different. You can experiment with different lines. So it's definitely best case scenario is you've been doing it long enough to train the reaction to do what needs to be done without even thinking about it. Because the fact is, you don't have time to have a thought in bobsled because then 20 meters is passed. Think a thought in a second, that's 20 meters. So you're trying to just take enough runs that you're programming your reaction to be the right ones in all sorts of different scenarios.
That's really cool.
yeah, it's kind of like that, like fight like you train like you fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you only get 2 runs a day, right? So in official training for World Cup, you take 2 runs. And really for brain health, you don't want to be doing much more than that anyway. Sometimes you'll do higher volume in the fall before the season starts. So it's one of those sports that you don't want to get a ton of volume on. So a lot of your training is you're trying to maximize those 2 runs and really get that locked in your brain, and then you do a ton of visualization. So I found the most success doing my visualizations and kind of running through my lines before a race. Late at night as you're falling asleep and you're kind of getting into that relaxed state, almost like a state of hypnosis, and so that you can really program things into your deeper limbic brain.
In research of prior to talking to you, I looked up a bunch of bobsled training videos, and I saw a bunch of people like standing there with their arms up, and they're like moving like kind of like side to side, kind of like they're I don't know. Is that like visualization of the track? Is that what's going on there?
Yes, yes, you know, so that's it's a really funny cultural nuance to the bobsled is when drivers will visualize, you do it with your hands, and it looks like everyone is playing these virtual reality video games.
Right.
And depending on the driver, it can be really animated, and we always make fun of each other. Like, you'll be sitting there, and so a Kreisel is a 360-degree turn in bobsled. You know, and you'll see someone just spinning in circle after circle, and they'll joke, like, I don't know, there's a Kreisel on this track. Where are they at?
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that. Okay.
Yep, those are people. Just, you know, it's another way of managing your anxiety before the runs too. Is just doing visualization after visualization so that you know you're prepared for the run.
Have you done the run? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying. So once you get to the start line, then you can just let it all go and relax and focus on pushing.
Have people done that specific run, like that specific course enough where you can actually visualize like the turns and what time you're doing the turns?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be in perfect, like some people will try and time it to, you know, depending on the track, it can be an average of 60-second runs. And some people will time it thinking that they need to get the timing down that way. And it's more of just the speed at which your brain processes. So you are, you know, you're just rehearsing. So yes, you've done the courses enough that like I can visualize every point of that track and what my plan is and what it feels like. Because also when you've got that much adrenaline in your system, like this stuff gets locked down. You never forget a bad hit or a crash.
I can imagine. Ooh. All right, so I got just a few more questions. We're here with Bree Schaaf. How would you say just Olympic winter sports analysis now? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so I do an interesting mix of it now. I also do play-by-play for the live World Cup luge feed,
Okay.
Which is through kind of the same production company that I got my start with doing bobsled. So there's one main guy that hosts the luge feed that will go to NBCSN or typically to the Olympic Channel. And then there's usually a few races a year that he can't do, and so I'll step in and host for the weekend with luge.
That's neat.
Yeah, it's pretty limited as far as, you know, commentary, you know, availability in the sliding sports world.
Okay.
But I mean, there is coverage, which is good. You know, people can tune in every winter to the Bobsled Skeleton Tour and the Luge World Cup Tour.
Outside of competing during your time at the Olympics, what would you say the most fascinating part of your experiences were?
You know, I think it's interesting because you do, or quite honestly, once you get there, you realize that, like, wow, like what I pictured is not, like, it's a money-making machine. And I don't want to sound too negative, but it's a business for everyone else. It's really interesting because as an athlete, you buy into the passion project and you buy into the idea of the Olympics are bigger than anything you can possibly do. And then you get to the Olympics and you realize, oh, wow, there's a lot of other people making a lot of money off of this thing that the athletes are doing for free. And
right.
So I think that kind of inspired me to start getting into athlete advocacy. So one of the things that I kind of ended up spending a lot of my time on is it started with being an athlete representative to the board of directors for USA Bobsled and Skeleton, and then that expanded to running for a position for the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee Athlete Council. So I'm currently the second vice chair of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee's Athlete Advisory Council, and working with other international athlete councils on trying to push for more rights. Like the big argument right now is Rule 40, giving athletes rights to their own likeness at the Olympics so you can actually make money off of yourself. Because one of the rules right now is you can't use social media as a blackout time, or even if you've got a personal sponsor, you can't talk about them or else you get penalized.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I hate to burst the bubble of, you know, of the, you know, kumbaya hand holding Olympics, but, you know, quite honestly, it's nice because everyone's talking more and more these days about athletes' rights, and and trying to figure out how the system can be sustainable for athletes who haven't had a say in the movement for a really long time.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time just competing for free, you're getting the short end of the stick. I get that it's the passion of it, but I mean,
yeah,
that's
you
crazy.
also buy into it, right? Like it's there are a lot of money comes in. There's a lot of endorsement deals. Rule 40 says that only the sponsors that have deals with the IOC and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee can be shown during that game time. And so we're just trying to figure out, okay, I understand that that's where the money comes in, that then funds a lot of sports, but how can we make more opportunities available for athletes in order to sell their own likeness and make some money off of, you go to the Olympics, and one of the hard parts for me is any of my personal sponsors, once I got to the Olympics, I couldn't even thank them, publicly.
Wow.
That's against the rules. Yeah, so just trying to figure out more ways for athletes to be able to live, in a sustainable way. And you're never going to, for most Olympic athletes, you're not going to make money. The Phelpses, Michael Phelps, that's a one-off, very unique scenario. Everyone else is working a job and, barely making ends meet. So if you make that choice, just trying to figure out how to make it more reasonable so that in the times when you can cash in, you've got more of an ability to when there's visibility.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Meanwhile, all these communities, take Squaw Valley, for example. That Olympics was in 1962 or 1964, and they're still making money off of that.
Yeah, good pull. So the system is definitely, it's not conducive to athlete welfare and athlete well-being, and that's become kind of my big side project of, that maybe the host cities are making money, all of these other businesses are able to make money off of it, but how do we find a way to actually get some athlete rights put in writing, be legally enforceable? The same as that's kind of the shocking thing is, you've got internationally recognized human rights law, but we don't have any international athlete rights. That's similar to human rights. So just figuring out how to help that system. Just the sports industry is a bit far behind in that because it's been able to be run this way. And it's the same argument like with college athletics. You guys probably saw that California just passed the bill allowing college athletics. So so similar to that, saying, okay, all these athletes, there's a ton of money being made off of their likeness, and they might not be able to profit after that if they don't continue in sports. So trying to find that balance of allowing that, it does seem pretty weird to think that someone else is using your image to make a ton of money and you're legally not allowed to have any of it.
That blows my mind.
Yeah, I actually didn't know about that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So while we're on this subject, let me bring up, we always hear about crazy stories about the living conditions. What is that like? What is the experience of living with hundreds of the best athletes in the world? And what's the housing like?
I'll say, for certain my living conditions were significantly better with NBC. Actually, NBC laughed when I got there because I was really worried about who my roommate was going to be. It did not even occur to me that as a professional and as a broadcaster that I would have my own room because I've been in a lifestyle of always having roommates, and that's when you're living your life when you're on the road, it's a big deal who your roomie is.
Right.
So the Olympic Village that we stayed at in Whistler was interesting because everyone is packed into this village, but the housing was, I think they were going to convert it into kind of athlete dormitories later. So when we got to Whistler, you get to the room, and the room was actually so small that we couldn't keep our bags in it. So we piled all of our bags. All of a sudden, you're loaded down with all this awesome Olympic gear, and we get to the room, we're like, we can't even keep it in here. So just like Dr. Seuss style, all of our bags are just piled up to the ceiling in the hallway. And then, but no one really complains because it's the Olympics. You're like, well, we're at the show. Make it work.
That's crazy. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Just sharing a bathroom, the bathroom's down the hallway. It's a full-on dormitory.
Damn.
So, are you into NFL? Are you into baseball? All that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my family is Seahawks are in my blood. My family has been Seahawks obsessed from the time. I can remember, I think I still got a T-shirt of my brothers from the '87 AFC championship.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but I actually went to a Seahawks game the other day. A friend of mine had tickets, and I got to head over to Seattle because I actually hadn't been to one in person.
Oh.
Yeah.
Quite the experience. I was going to ask you if you were a Ravens fan because I found a video of you with John Harbaugh teaching you how to tackle.
That was one of the best experiences. So prior to the 2010 game, Harbaugh and his staff came out through some connection of our board member. They came out to take some bobsled rides and have dinner with us. And we were in a pre-Olympic kind of holding camp before testing our sleds and stuff before going up to Vancouver to the games. And so Harbaugh gave the greatest motivational speech I've ever heard in my entire life. I was like, this is what you say to be big bucks. This guy's amazing. And he was awesome. So afterwards, my brakeman, Emily, for the Olympics was like, I wonder if I just can't tackle. So that's where that video came from, was him teaching her how to form tackle. And then he was like, all right, now you do me. And so then she gets in there and lifts him up. Amazing.
It was really funny. I enjoyed watching that.
Yeah, and we actually got, so after the Olympics, through that same connection, we got a tour of their training. Harbaugh took us on a tour of their training facility.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and we got to run some drills on their practice field, and some of the players were in there working out. So, like, their lineman coach was showing my brakeman again, like, how to hit the pads and stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is really cool.
So I don't really have too much else.
I have one more.
Okay.
I'd like to go back. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact details of it, but I heard you're making a big push on adding I think it was another bobsled event for women in the Olympics.
Yeah, we've been trying to get 4 women added for a while. So the men have always had 2 disciplines and 2 medal opportunities, 2 men and 4 men. And so the women, I took my first 4-man trip a couple of years after the 2010 games, and that became kind of, a side project that we've been pushing hard. Kaylee Humphrey is one of the best bobsledders in the world, and Alana Myers, all the women are on board, and it's in a pretty frustrating battle. So it was up to review for this next Olympics a couple of years ago, and they ended up selecting women's monobob instead of women's 4-man. So instead of saying, okay, this thing that the men do, you're actually not allowed to do that, but we will let you just be by yourself in the sled. So
that sounds dangerous.
Well, it is actually, because the thing, controlling a sled comes from weight. So the heavier you are, the more effective your steering is. So the monobob are really tricky to drive because it's just you and the sled. The sleds themselves are quite a bit lighter, so they're really squirrely. You have to have a much finer touch. So women already have to have a finer touch with the sleds because, they're typically at least 100 pounds lighter than the men's sleds, because the male athletes tend to be nearly 50 pounds heavier each. So then you take it to a monobob, and now it's much harder to get a really good grasp on the ice with the D-rings because you're not as heavy and you don't have as good of a grip. So they tried narrowing the runners, and that kind of gives you a little bit too much control, so they'll crawl around the bottom of the corners. It's a weird feel, but that's not to say that I'm not grateful that women now have the opportunity at 2 medals in the Olympics. But the weird part about that is the sport didn't exist. No one was doing it. Women were trying to do 4-man, but then suddenly something became an Olympic sport without ever having been raced in a real racing format. So now they're kind of in this mad rush to try and get that going, and not have it look embarrassing. I mean, I definitely say, like, we were definitely insulted, for sure.
You have.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's unbelievable, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of another part of that, passion for athlete advocacy is, okay, these decisions are being made at a table with no women, and no one is asking the women's athletes what they think. So it's the problem, but we're still, working on athlete representation. It's not just about, athlete representation, but it's about having leverage at that table. Like, we're lucky in the U.S., we're actually at the forefront of that. We legally require every committee and board to have 20% athlete representation on it. But the problem is, at 20%, if the athletes disagree, you're still never going to sway a vote because you can't possibly win a vote.
Right.
So
that's a very unfair advantage.
Yeah, so we've been trying to figure out, like, there was a huge shift in baseball when MLB, got their players union. Same with football.
Right.
Trying to figure out how can you find that model. We've been looking into independence or what would give us some sort of leverage at the table, but in the sports world that's covering now, it's a bit easier to organize when you're all professional baseball players. So, in this instance, you've got 50 different sports covered under the Olympics. And all sorts of different issues, and most people not making money. So the power comes from money. Women's tennis didn't start to get equality until they have the prize money. So now it's just matter of okay, how do we approach this from an angle that's never been done before that works for how unique Olympic sports are structured?
How receptive to other countries are the athletes of other countries to trying to get on board with working with you guys in these types of scenarios?
It's doing great. I think people are finally starting to realize that the power is going to be from communicating. So I actually just got back from an International Athlete Council meeting in Toronto. That's where we were communicating. That's where I flew back from last week. That's it. So that has a chance of working when it's upsetting the International Olympic Committee that you're starting to meet. So that's definitely something we've been working on and communicating with the World Players Association and trying to figure out what we can do, obviously stronger together in looking at these issues that the IOC has not been willing to back down on. Because it's not, there's a lot of anger towards the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee right now because of the gymnastics scandal and, how that was handled, unfortunately. But the bigger problem is the sports culture that stems from the IOC and running it like a business where athletes are afraid to speak out and administration is not listening to them because they don't want to hurt their sponsorship liability.
Right.
So it's kind of a vicious circle.
Oh, that's crazy. I did not. That was a crazy rabbit hole you just took me down. I want to know more. Yeah, I mean, that's, part of the thing. It's a business, though, where you don't know about it because it's not necessarily marketable. It's not shiny. It's the kind of the uglier side of sports. Most athletes don't speak up when something happens because they're in a culture where you are doing this solely to earn a spot on the Olympic team, and you don't want to risk that chance. So that's why it took so long for those gymnasts, to speak up, and they're also being convinced that things are normal. And so, to some degree, that has been happening in, sports, sport-wide, obviously, and hopefully not that level of abuse, but athletes being afraid of, calling something out or when something isn't right because of the power that administration and coaches have always had. What stops people from not saying something after you're done with your competing careers?
I think it's two things. Sometimes it's been traumatic enough that the athletes just want to get over it and move on, like they'll see a therapist. And the fact is, and you guys have probably seen, when people speak out, when women speak out, you are, the high probability of being attacked. So then you're risking your name being torched to the mud if everyone attacks you for telling the truth and it's telling you that's not the truth. So it becomes much, much harder after the abuse to deal with the aftermath than, so oftentimes athletes would rather just go to therapy and try and move on. But as we're seeing, a lot of alumni, there's just so many issues, that it's, but, ideally athletes do come forward because that's what we need in order to improve the system. So, and that's where the Athlete Council comes in. The retired athletes definitely tend to do better in those athlete representative roles. But what's interesting is oftentimes you're so indoctrinated into a system that it might take you years, 10 years. I just talked to a former gymnast in the '84 Olympics who said that she didn't realize until the Nasser stuff came out how she was abused, right? And so this is someone, you know,
Wow.
who's in their 60s now. Yeah. So a lot of times it's so ingrained in the culture that you might not recognize it at the time as not being okay until way, way later, because the system is what gets you there, and you're taught that you need the system in order to achieve your goal.
Crazy.
And I would imagine that also, I mean, if you're also competing with all these other countries that don't have necessarily the same
mentality that
we
US
do,
does.
or the same, you know, liberal rights that we have in the West.
Exactly, yeah. Like we have so much depth that if you speak up and you get blacklisted, then there's always going to be someone to bubble up and take your spot.
Right.
So, you know, that's the tough part too of being in the U.S. and having such depth of field. Like if the athletes were to protest, there's still 100 group of athletes beneath them that would use their legal rights to solo race. And like if the athletes wanted to battle the authority and say, okay, we're going to protest the Olympics, you know, track and field, we are not going to compete to cover our point. But, you know, you're always going to have who's to stop the athletes that were on the bubble and really want to go from going and competing.
Like people who are just short of getting in there, they'll take your spot.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So it's really difficult to organize, and that's, I think, been the difference here. You're not, you know, you've seen rare instances, like with the women's hockey team, of walkouts and refusing to compete. You know, and women's soccer, they try and negotiate equal pay. But it's really, really risky to, you know, especially for Olympic athletes that might only have this one quad, this one Olympics as their chance. And are they willing to give that up for the greater good?
Well, there's a massive gap in between when an Olympic athlete will compete again and these women who are trying to get the equality pay for women's soccer, because they're going to compete the next season, where there's a 4-year gap.
Yeah, for the World Cup, for the bigger events that you're seeing. So especially with the Olympics, like if your leverage only comes every 4 years, or winter and summer, you know, balanced every 2 years, you know, you're not working with a whole lot there.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and by the time the next one comes around, you might pass your prime and not make the team anyway. So.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I went to the U.S. Olympians and Paralympians reunion. Actually, it was in Las Vegas a few years ago, and there was a woman who. This is a story that hasn't been. I don't think they've ever done a major kind of in-depth story on this yet. But the Olympic team, I think it was 1980, that was not allowed to go because the U.S. decided to boycott the Olympics, and
from Russia.
Had an entire generation of Olympians. This woman said that she qualified for the Olympic team in diving by the skin of her teeth. There was her only chance. And so then when the government decided that none of the Olympians could go compete, you know, for her, this reunion was the first time that she was ever able to even look at anything Olympics, because she'd been so devastated for all that time trying to recover, you know, a life goal that was lost because of politics.
That's
so it affects people on so many different levels. And hopefully, I know they've been trying to get a documentary together on that lost Olympic team, because technically, even all those athletes qualified for the Olympics, they're not Olympians because they didn't set foot or compete at an Olympic venue.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, because the 1980 Olympics was in Moscow, I believe, right?
Yep. They boycotted the Moscow Olympics, I think.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the athletes, mind you, it was the government.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't the athletes. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the government had cut the U.S. It wasn't the U.S. Olympic Committee at the time, but they cut the funding, and so you're not allowed to go. They've not given them a choice. So, yeah, it's been for the Ted Stevens Act. They've tried to put protections in place now so that politics and sports can't mix. But that's a whole other conversation, because there's another rule called Rule 60, where you risk your medal and getting kicked out of the Olympics if you show any sort of if you make any political statement, not just on a podium, but on social media as well.
What?
Yep. So it's pretty significant restrictions on freedom of speech there, and that's something else that we've been looking at. Is there's human rights on freedom of speech, but there aren't sports rights on freedom of speech because sponsors own these domains. And so it was we just had our big annual athlete council meeting where all the representatives come from different sports. And it was a huge discussion as one athlete, there was a Paralympic athlete who is of Native American descent but served in elite military operations and said that he would never want that moment tarnished by someone else, if he's having his moment on the podium. But then you have other people saying, if this is the only opportunity for someone to listen, like there was a fencer that made big news for kneeling on the podium recently, and it's like, if that's the only space where someone's going to listen, then, there's an argument there. There's also an argument that said, if you're standing on the podium and say someone from Russia does a political protest, you have no idea what they're protesting, how mad should you be that that's your moment and it's now been taken over by this thing that you have no idea what it is. So the idea that we're pushing for now is like, allow athletes, whether it's elite, but athletes to voice opinions on their own social media and not risk, the punishments that are written into the rules of the IOC.
Do you have things against you talking to athletes about stuff like this when you're doing commentating?
It depends on the arena, right? So there are some guys, NBC has guidelines, but it's mostly just best practices for broadcasting guidelines. So, you do want to kind of stay away from hot button political issues.
Right.
And their big thing is don't speculate, don't refer to women as girls, anything that might be demeaning. And so there is, that is, you have to respect the company's culture in that instance. So if I'm at the Olympics covering for NBC, I'm not there as Bree Schaaf, separate entity. I'm there as Bree Schaaf, NBC Olympics reporter / commentator.
Right.
Yeah, so, like any other, job. But at the last Olympics was when we had things brewing on our athlete council regarding the head of the U.S. Olympic Committee at that time. So I was having to navigate multiple roles, and the athletes decided to publish a statement, and eventually the CEO did step down because of his role there in the gymnastics issue.
Bree, I really, really, really love talking to you. This has been one of the most fascinating conversations I've had.
Thanks for letting me nerd out on sports, on niche Olympic sports issues.
Anytime that you want to do it again?
Yeah, I would love to talk to you some more. I just don't want to take an hour of your time, and I feel like it just disappeared because I was so fascinated in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean that.
Oh, cool. I'm so glad that was fun. I mean, I'll definitely have updates for you guys. We're pushing. We have negotiations coming up with the leadership of the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee as we try and figure out how do you increase the athlete voice and advocacy in the U.S. And there's lots of stuff brewing with the IOC, so there's definitely going to be some updates, and so I'll let you guys know when there's more to talk about.
Yeah, we should definitely have you back on the show if you would like to. That was awesome, and seriously, thank you so much for your time, and don't feel like you have to feel bad about rescheduling whenever you whatever. We're super flexible, so
cool. Me too, usually. Let's check it out. Darn flu gets you at random times. So thank you guys. That was super fun, and thanks for your interest. And for us now as athlete advocates, trying to get that out there to the general public, a better understanding of the bigger issues at play here in order to get backing.
I want to learn more, and I want to tell people more about it. So let's do this again.
I could listen to that for another hour. That was awesome.
Actually, we talked about that, maybe getting an athlete, a U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee Athlete Council podcast, because there's so many issues that we dive into. We're expected to be experts on all these things, yet we're volunteers. So these positions that I'm doing, they're completely volunteer. So everyone is working full-time jobs and volunteering to be athlete representatives. And, and as you can tell, there's so many different issues under this umbrella that we're trying to tackle. So that's part of our goal, is to get professionals hired on to help us out so that we can send people to all these meetings.
We're always open to talk to you. So until you get that going, come talk to us.
I'll let everyone know that there's already a podcast set up for it.
All right.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to hear from you. Can't wait to hear from you again. All right, take care.
Have a
Bye.
good night.
Wow.
Bro,
That was
bro.
crazy. Yo,
What?
that was crazy.
That was so cool.
That was crazy. Yo, that was Bree Schaaf,
Damn.
former Olympic athlete, very, very still involved in advocacy for Olympic athletes. Had no
Every-
idea. And Olympic NBC winter sports analyst. Crazy.
Damn.
Wow.
That was really, really
That was
fucking
fun.
cool.
That was fun. Guys, we're gonna do our regular show here. Let's say maybe 15. Let's take just a quick little break
Yeah, I'll
here.
take a quick little break, and then
We're gonna
back
get
to it.
right back into doing our regular show.
Probably just do the picks tonight, and then
Yeah,
call
we're
her
just
good.
gonna do the picks tonight, and we'll roll out. Please share this video. Share
Absolutely.
this video. Share it everywhere you can. That was Bree Schaaf. Wow, man, that was amazing. I'm gonna cut it off. I'm enamored. We'll be back on in like 15-20 minutes.
Yeah. Holy Christ.